Fourth Amendment. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So obviously this is one of the big ones.
Yes.
This is one of the ones that everybody actually knows, even if they don't know the exact words. We've all watched enough detective shows to be able to ask if people have a warrant. So, the police do not have the right to come into your house unless they have a warrant. They don't have a right to search you unless they have a warrant. Now, it is generally considered that moving cars are allowed to be stopped. I forget the exact case law, but moving cars are their own separate category. But your person and your house, cops need either probable cause, like immediate probable cause. If somebody hears screaming and there are blood spatters appearing on your windows, that is considered immediate probable cause for the cops to enter your house. And honestly, that's a situation where I think we're kind of okay with it. Because that's not a good sounding situation, kids. But if there's not, I believe it's called imminent threat that appears to be happening in your house, cops need a warrant. They can ask, and you have the right to say no. And if they say, well, we'll be back with a warrant, say, okay. Because if they can get a warrant, then great. But possibly they can't, and they don't have the right to be there. Crime scenes, they have a right to search. If something is in plain sight, like if you live in a state where marijuana isn't legal, don't grow marijuana in your front yard. The cops are allowed to do something about that.
Again, I see it says both oath or affirmation again.
Oath or affirmation, because some religions say you can't swear oaths. And the Founding Fathers, again, very respectful of one another's religious requirements. And that is, I don't know of any Founding Fathers who were religious bigots. There probably was one, and I just don't know. But that is one of the ones that is most broadly applicable. Most of the Founding Fathers were aware that religious freedom was important, and so oath or affirmation appears a lot in the constitutional stuff from that era, because they want it to be clear that if you don't swear an oath to God, you don't have to. It doesn't make your word less valid if you just say, and in court now, you don't have to say, so help me God. You can just say, yes, I'm going to tell the truth. This is my solemn promise. And it's the same thing here. You know, we've got the whole grand jury system. We've got, you know, going before a judge to get a warrant. The whole system, you do not have to swear an oath for any of that. And the particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized, warrants have to be specific. You can't just say, you know, I have this evidence that this guy committed a crime, so I want to go into his house and see what I can find. You have to say exactly what you're looking for. And again, if something is in plain sight when they go into your house, then okay, fine, they're allowed to consider that as evidence. But if they find something, if a cop is going through a box in the back of your closet looking for evidence of one crime that they have a warrant to look for evidence for, and they find evidence of another crime, oh well, they can't do anything about that. They can't even use the fact that they saw it to get a warrant to go get it. They have to have other reason to believe that it's there. If they find evidence of the crime they're actually looking for evidence of that isn't on their warrant, oh well. Like, if they're after you for a bank heist, and they say in their search warrant, we are looking for the money, the masks, and the weapons. If they find your schematic of the bank, too bad, they can't seize it. Unless you've left it on, like, the kitchen counter.
Yeah, I think there's I brought this up. There was a court case where these people found some pornography in this lady's house, but it said the warrant was for they tried to arrest her for pornography and stuff. I would say it was, but they're like, nope. The court was like, nope. It's illegal. You have the warrant for it.
Yeah. Yeah. The Fourth Amendment is really clear. They can only seize what they're looking for. If they find out that you have an accomplice who's right there with you when they arrest you, but they don't have a warrant for that person's arrest, oh well, they've got to go get a warrant for that person too. Now, again, if you are literally actually in the commission of a crime in front of a cop, you're going to get arrested. They don't need a warrant. Exigent circumstances. There it is. Exigent circumstances, the cops have a lot more leeway.
Yeah. I believe I brought this up in the original of this, but Carmen Sandiego video games.
Yeah. Oh, I played the hell out of Carmen Sandiego.
And a few times I caught up with the perp, but my warrant wasn't finalized yet. I forgot about it, and they escaped because.
Yep. Yeah. If you don't have your warrant, I watch a lot of Perry Mason. It's a family thing. My mom watched it. My dad's mom watched it. It was one of the few things they had in common was Perry Mason.
Yeah, I watched. I think I watched the finale in the late '80s, early '90s. One episode I really saw was the series finale when he was old, and and color.
Actually, it's the next to last episode. It's really funny. There's one episode in color, and it's not even the finale. It's the next to last episode of the series. But, but you get a lot of, Lieutenant Tragg, who I love. Lieutenant Tragg is possibly one of my favorite characters on the show because he's got this great sense of humor that he allows to come out every once in a while. And he pretends to like Perry a lot less than he does. It's very, very obvious. But anyway, it's always, well, I have a warrant. Or, well, I'll get a warrant. And Perry says, okay. The idea of the warrant is so important, and it's so ingrained in our culture, too. It is true that a lot of how Americans view policing in the United States is flawed based on the media we consume. There's a whole thing called the CSI effect, where we expect a lot more evidence in court cases than there is realistically going to be. I don't remember the exact statistics, but you're actually vanishingly unlikely to find fingerprints left by a perpetrator at the scene of a crime. Fingerprints don't preserve as well as people think they do. And an enormous percentage of crimes, you're not going to have DNA evidence because how would you have DNA evidence in that particular crime? But people expect it because they're so used to watching CSI, where, there's enhance and DNA evidence and all of these things that don't exist in the real world. Obviously, DNA evidence does exist, but not in every circumstance. But shows like CSI, like Perry Mason, like Law and Order,
NCIS,
yes, Criminal Minds, all of these shows do give us a very clear perception of Fourth Amendment rights.
So do you need a warrant to search your kids' belonging next to you?
Yes. Yeah. You cannot unreasonably search and seize my daughter.
I meant you.
Oh yeah, no. I can. Well, I mean, I'm her mom. I can. I have a lot more rights than the cops do. But they, admittedly, people get a little bit too into the idea of cops needing a warrant because they don't talk as much on a lot of these shows about, imminent, like, oh, I'm watching a crime in front of me, I can arrest you now. Lieutenant Drag only ever has a warrant. I don't think I've ever seen an episode of that show where Drag was able to arrest somebody because he watched them committing a crime in front of him. It happens more often on Law and Order, but it still happens less often on Law and Order than you might think. So you get cases like that where, people think they have more rights than they do. But we do know you don't have to let the cops search your house. They need a warrant. You don't have to, let the cops search your person. You do have to let them search your car if it's in motion. Especially at a sobriety checkpoint. Sobriety checkpoints have passed Supreme Court attention. They are legal, and the cops have more rights there because of the moving car thing, and because, frankly, if you are drunk, you are a danger to everyone else on the road.
You should start making warrants to search your kids' rooms. It's like they're like, I have a warrant to get in your room.
No. Our house is a dictatorship. I can search them if I want to. It's a benevolent dictatorship. Technically, I think it's a benevolent oligarchy because it is, me and their dad. But we do not function in a democracy in this household. We don't have to. But I think this is one of the only amendments where people have a pretty decent idea of the powers that it gives the government. And more important, this is a limitation on the powers of the government. The Constitution has a lot of things it gives the government the ability to do. The Bill of Rights is more about limitations. Things that you as a citizen have as something under the Constitution. It is your power, not the government's power.
Speaking of Bill of Rights, was this a big deal in the colonial times?
Oh, yeah.
They needed to put this out in paper and word?
Oh, yeah. No. So I don't 100% know the history of English law on this subject, but it is certainly true that soldiers, if nothing else, could stop people for whatever reason and search them. Could go into their houses for whatever reason or for no reason and search them. And I don't know if that was a thing that was happening in England at the time, but colonists were considered to have fewer rights. That was part of the reason for the Declaration of Independence in the first place. one of the many, many quotes in the musical 1776 that is an accurate quote to something that was said by the people who were shown to see it in the musical is Ben Franklin says, one of the people said that, well, he was proud to be said to have the rights of an Englishman. And Ben Franklin responds with, well, I'm sure that an ox would be proud to say that he had the rights of a bull, but he'd rather have not been castrated. That's a paraphrase, but it's like, look, you can say you have these rights all you want, but if in practice you don't, that's what actually matters. And so the colonials at the time had fewer rights simply because they didn't have anywhere to petition other than their colonial courts. It was too complicated to take your case higher to England. So in practice, they just didn't. So whether this was considered a right of the English at the time, it was not a right that the colonial people actually had.
Oh, I found the case I was talking about before. It's Mapp versus Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's go into, let me call it up for myself here. Mapp v. Ohio. Which is what's in a lot of the shows I watch, it's referred to as fruit of the poisoned tree. So, a woman was convicted of possessing obscene materials after an illegal search of her house for a fugitive. And the majority found the cops had no right to, leaving aside whether she had a right to obscene materials or not, the cops didn't have the right to search her house in the first place because, their search for the fugitive was illegal, and they certainly didn't have the right to use anything that they found in their illegal search in any case. And this has been case law since 1961. This is the Warren Court. They didn't even talk about the First Amendment rights involved. Because the Fourth Amendment rights were, in their opinion, the relevant ones. And that is a thing that I'm not sure a lot of people know, is that when you present your case to the Supreme Court with your, I have this case and I'm petitioning it for this reason, the court may find on your side for a completely different reason. And you're petitioning under one amendment, and they're like, okay, but this is actually the relevant one. Her First Amendment right to have obscene materials would have to be somebody else's problem further down the road because they saw her Fourth Amendment right as the important one in the moment. It didn't matter if she had the right to have those materials or not. What mattered was the cops shouldn't have found them in the first place. Again, in any crime show you watch, they're going to call it fruit of the poisoned tree. The fruit of the tree is also poison. You can't have it. Now, if the cops can show they would have found it for other reasons, that's kind of a backdoor way into getting the evidence in again.
Would that be probable cause?
Yeah, well, if they can say, okay, well, yeah, we found it this way that wasn't technically legal, but here, if we had done such and such, we could have had probable cause for a warrant, and we would have gotten our warrant, and we would have found the thing, then often they can get the evidence readmitted.
Yeah, but in that case, technically, wouldn't the warrant just have been to look for the fugitive and not for the pornography or whatever?
Well, that's the thing. Is they would have had to have said, we have probable cause that we would have gotten a warrant for the pornography. Okay, probably if they could have gotten a warrant for the fugitive and, again, left on the kitchen counter or whatever, they probably could have gotten it readmitted. But A, only probably, and B, I bet me a shiny new nickel that was not where she was keeping her obscene materials. I'm willing to bet, and I don't know the details of the case that well, I'm willing to bet that wherever she was keeping her obscene materials, yeah, it was in a Foot Locker in her basement. Oh, and it wasn't, they found some which she said a previous tenant had left behind in a Foot Locker in her basement. So, yeah, the cops were not going to find that unless they had probable cause to find that specific Foot Locker and search it for obscene materials. And since they wouldn't have had that probable cause, she would not have been arrested. There are ways they could have gotten it in, but there was no way she was ever going to be arrested for that particular crime because they would not have had reason for a warrant. And without evidence, she can't be put in jail. The rule of law is something we take very, very seriously in this country, traditionally. And we want the police to have to follow the rules. And victims' rights are seen as very important, but also the rights of the innocent and even the rights of the guilty are important in this country as well. Just because you're guilty of a crime doesn't mean you lose all of your rights. And the Fourth Amendment is there to protect the innocent and the guilty. If I were running a numbers racket out of my house, I'm not. I wouldn't know how to, but if I were, I have just as much right to not be searched by the cops without evidence as anyone else who is innocent. And that is built into the system.
Says their persons, houses, papers, and effects.
Yeah. Cops can't search your house. Cops can't search your stuff. Cops can't search you. The case law on things like internet search history and things like that is a little bit complicated and back and forth, and I don't know it really well because, as established many, many times, I am not a lawyer. But you do have this list of rights that keep you safe. Stop and frisk was a Fourth Amendment issue where cops were randomly searching people. Shockingly, people of color were a lot more likely to be randomly searched than white people. I'm sure you're amazed.
Totally.
But that is a Fourth Amendment violation. That is unreasonable search of a person. And, side note, didn't actually reduce crime rates. Because it was more racial than anything else. It turns out the police aren't actually any good at deciding what criminals look like. And so the people that they were searching were actually more likely to be innocent. But even if they'd been more likely to be guilty, it was still a Fourth Amendment violation.
All right. So, anything else?
Nope, there's your Fourth Amendment in a not quite half-hour nutshell.
Nice.